He called me a disappointment, a worker with no potential. What he didn't know was that he'd just given me the fuel to build an empire out of his own ashes. The words still echo in my head, even now. It's not personal. It's just a fundamental lack of potential. My boss, Mark, leaned back in his ridiculously expensive ergonomic chair, steepling his fingers as if he were delivering a profound business sermon instead of shattering my career. He had this way of looking at you, not through you, but just over your shoulder, as if a more interesting person was about to walk into the room. In that moment, the person he was looking for was the HR rep, a woman named Carol who was sitting stiffly beside me, holding a beige folder that contained the execution order for my professional life. For 5 years, I had poured everything into Innovate Inc. It was one of those trendy marketing agencies with a foosball table in the break room and a mandatory fun Friday that was anything but. The corporate mantra was, "We're not a company, we're a family." I, like an idiot, actually believed it. I was the first one in, the last one out. I was the guy who canceled dates to finish a presentation, the one who took on the nightmare clients no one else wanted and somehow, miraculously, turned them around. I lived and breathed Innovate Inc., certain that my dedication would eventually pay off. I wasn't just climbing the ladder, I was painstakingly building the rungs for myself, one late night at a time. The project that I thought would be my masterpiece, my final leap to a senior position, was for our biggest client, Apex Dynamics. They were a tech giant, notoriously difficult to please, and their massive advertising account was up for renewal. The pressure was immense. Mark had assigned the project to his golden girl, Sarah, but everyone on the team knew she was more style than substance. She was brilliant at schmoozing in meetings, but when it came to the actual grunt work, the market research, the data analysis, the creative strategy, she was lost. So naturally, the work fell to me. For 3 straight months, my apartment was just a place I occasionally slept. My diet consisted of lukewarm coffee and takeout containers. I single-handedly crafted the entire Future Forward campaign. I found the hook, I designed the pitch deck, I wrote the copy. I even put together the preliminary media buy strategy. Sarah would breeze by my desk every few days, glance at my screen and say something encouraging like, "Wow, looks great, keep up the good work," before heading off to a 2-hour lunch. The day of the pitch to Apex was a blur. Mark and Sarah presented my work, my slides, my words, as if they had personally bled for them. I was in the room, of course, relegated to the role of technical support, sitting in the corner with the laptop ready to click next slide on command. The Apex executives were blown away. I remember their CEO, a sharp man named Mr. Harrison, looking directly at me when he praised a specific data point I had uncovered. "That insight right there," he said, pointing at the screen, "is why we do business with you. Brilliant." Mark just smiled and nodded, placing a proprietary hand on Sarah's shoulder. "That's my team," he beamed, "always digging deeper." We won the renewal. It was a 7-figure contract, the biggest in the agency's history. The office celebrated with cheap champagne. Mark gave a speech praising Sarah's vision and leadership. He mentioned me once, a quick, "and thanks to the team in the background for their support." It stung, but I swallowed my pride. I told myself the work speaks for itself. My time will come. They know who really did it. A promotion, or at the very least a significant bonus, had to be on the table. 2 weeks later, I was called into Mark's office. I walked in with a hopeful smile, my heart thumping with anticipation. This was it. This was the moment my 5 years of sacrifice would finally be acknowledged. But the sight of Carol from HR and the beige folder on the table instantly turned my stomach to ice. There was no praise. There was no bonus. There was just Mark, avoiding my gaze, talking about restructuring and strategic realignment. Then came the final, brutal blow. He said that while I was a reliable worker, I lacked the proactive, visionary spark they were looking for in their senior talent. I lacked potential. My campaign, the one that had just secured the company's future, apparently didn't count. I was numb as I packed my sad little box of belongings. My coffee mug, a framed photo, a couple of industry awards I'd won for the company. People I had considered friends suddenly couldn't look me in the eye, their faces a mixture of pity and relief that it wasn't them. As I did the walk of shame towards the elevator, I saw Sarah laughing with a group by the water cooler, holding a new key card, the one for the corner office I thought was going to be mine. That night, I sat in my silent apartment, surrounded by the pathetic remnants of my career, replaying Mark's words over and over. Lack of potential. The phrase was a brand, seared into my self-worth. I felt worthless, used up, and utterly defeated. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, an unknown number lighting up the screen. I almost ignored it, wanting nothing more than to be left alone in my misery. But for some reason, I picked it up. My voice was a croak. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and instantly familiar. "Am I speaking with the person who came up with the future forward strategy?" it asked. I was so stunned I could barely form a word. It was Mr. Harrison, the CEO of Apex Dynamics. "Yes," I stammered. "This is him." There was a pause, and then he said something that made the hair on my arm stand up. "Good. I just got off a very confusing call with Mark. He informed me you're no longer with the company. Listen, my team and I aren't fools. We know who the real talent was in that room. So I have a question for you, and it's a simple one. Where are you going next? Because our contract has a 30-day termination clause, and wherever you land, Apex Dynamics is coming with you." I held the phone to my ear for a full 10 seconds after Mr. Harrison hung up, the silence of my apartment roaring around me. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. A prank. It had to be a prank, some cruel joke orchestrated by my former colleagues. But the voice had been unmistakable, the tone clipped and authoritative. It was him. He had called me. Apex Dynamics, the 7-figure golden goose of Innovate Inc., was willing to jump ship. For me. A guy who, just an hour ago, was sitting in the dark contemplating a future of freelance copywriting and instant noodles. A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile, not yet. It was sharp and predatory. The fog of despair began to burn away, replaced by the white-hot heat of pure, unadulterated rage. Lack of potential. Mark's condescending words replayed in my mind, but this time they didn't sting. They were fuel. Potential isn't something you're given. It's something you prove. And I was about to prove mine on a scale he couldn't possibly imagine. The next 72 hours were a caffeine-fueled blur of activity. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. First, I drained my savings account. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. I spent hours online registering a business name. I toyed with names that sounded aggressive or clever, but I settled on something simple, something meaningful to me. Keystone Strategy. I was the keystone on the Apex project, the central piece that held the entire structure together. Without me, it all would have crumbled. Innovate Inc. was about to learn that the hard way. I secured a small, windowless office in a shared workspace building on the other side of town. It was little more than a glorified closet with a desk and a wobbly chair. But when I stood in it for the first time, it felt like a kingdom. This was mine. No foosball tables, no forced fun, just a space to build an empire. The first thing I bought was a coffee maker. The second was a whiteboard. On that pristine white surface, I wrote 2 words in big, bold letters: Apex Dynamics. The call to Mr. Harrison was the most terrifying moment of my life. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. I pitched him my new one-man company Keystone Strategy with a confidence I absolutely did not feel. I expected him to laugh, to tell me he needed a real agency, not some guy in a closet, but he just listened patiently. When I was done, a breathless mess of jargon and promises, he simply said, "Send over the paperwork. My legal team will be in touch. Welcome to the big leagues, son." When the official termination notice from Apex hit Innovate Inc.'s server, The fallout would be catastrophic, but I couldn't do it alone. Apex was a huge account, and I was just one person. I needed a team, not just any team. I needed the other keystones, the other overlooked, underappreciated talents that Mark and his cronies took for granted. My first call was to Maya. Maya was a data analyst at Innovate, a quiet genius who could find narratives in numbers that no one else could see. She was the secret weapon behind half of the agency's successful campaigns. But because she was introverted and didn't play the office politics game, she was consistently passed over for promotions. I had always made a point to credit her in my reports, to seek out her insights, to treat her like the brilliant mind she was. We met at a small coffee shop far from our old office. She looked nervous, clutching her latte like a shield. I laid it all out for her. The firing, the call from Harrison, my new company, the tiny office. I couldn't offer her the salary she was making, not yet. Instead, I offered her something Innovate Inc. never would, a partnership. I offered her a significant equity stake. "This won't be just a job, Maya," I said, leaning forward, my voice low and intense. "We'll be building this from the ground up. Every win will be our win. Your insights won't just be a line item in a report. They'll be the foundation of our entire strategy. No more being ignored. You'll be a founder." I watched her face, the gears turning behind her intelligent eyes. She was weighing the risk, the security of a steady paycheck against the terrifying, thrilling unknown. She looked down at her cup, then back up at me, and a small, determined smile touched her lips. "When do we start?" she asked. A week later, Maya and I were in our little office, the official signed contract from Apex Dynamics sitting on the desk between us. The ink was still fresh. It felt surreal, like a dream. We had done it. Keystone Strategy was no longer just an idea. It was a real company with a real multi-million-dollar client. We celebrated with a bottle of champagne, an expensive one this time, drinking it out of our new coffee mugs. The feeling was electric. It was the start of everything. "Okay," I said, setting my mug down and turning to the whiteboard. "Phase 1 is complete. Now for Phase 2. I picked up a black marker. Apex was their biggest client. Who was number 2? Maya's eyes lit up with understanding. We were just getting started. As I was about to write the name of our next target on the board, my phone, sitting on the desk, began to vibrate violently. The caller ID flashed a name I never thought I'd see again. It was Mark. He must have just found out. I took a deep breath, a cold, calm sense of power washing over me. I looked at Maya, who nodded slowly. I answered the call and put it on speaker. Before I could even say hello, his voice, choked with panic and fury, screamed through the phone. "What the hell did you do?" I let the silence hang in the air, a beautiful, pregnant pause that I knew was driving him insane. I could picture him perfectly, pacing his glass-walled office, his face flushed, probably loosening the knot of his designer tie. Maya was watching me, a look of nervous excitement on her face. The hunter was now the hunted, and the sound of his panic was the sweetest music I had ever heard. "Mark," I said finally, my voice deliberately calm and level. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" The polite civility of it seemed to enrage him further. "Don't play dumb with me," he sputtered. "I just got off the phone with Apex's legal department. They're exercising their termination clause. They're leaving, our biggest client, after 5 years. And they said they're moving their business to some new pop-up agency. Keystone Strategy. You son of a bitch, that's you, isn't it?" "It is," I confirmed simply. I leaned back in my wobbly chair, a king surveying his domain of a desk and a half-empty box of donuts. "Funny how things work out, isn't it?" "How could you do this?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "This is a betrayal. We were a family. I gave you a start in this business." The audacity of it, the sheer hypocrisy, was breathtaking. I felt a laugh bubble up, cold and sharp. "Family? Mark, you fired me 2 weeks ago. You stood there and told me I had no potential while your little favorite, who contributed nothing, took credit for my work and got my promotion. You don't get to preach about loyalty now. You set the rules for this game. I'm just playing it better than you." I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end, the gears of his mind grinding, shifting from rage to panicked negotiation. Okay, look," he said, his tone changing, becoming wheedling. "Maybe I was hasty. We can talk about this. I'll make it right. Come back. I'll double your salary. Triple it. Just call Harrison. Tell him it was a mistake. Tell him you're coming home." The offer was pathetic. He still didn't get it. He thought this was about money. He thought he could buy me back, put me back in my box. "It's too late for that, Mark," I said, the finality in my voice like the closing of a vault door. "I'm not interested in a salary. I'm interested in building something of my own, something based on talent and hard work, not nepotism and office politics. Thanks for the call, though. It's been illuminating." And with that, I hung up. The small office was silent for a moment. Then Maya let out a long, slow whistle. "Wow," she said, her eyes wide. "He really has no idea what's coming, does he?" "Not a clue," I said, turning back to the whiteboard, "and we're not going to give him time to figure it out." I uncapped the marker and wrote down the name of Innovate's second largest client, Sterling Automotive. Sterling was a luxury car brand, and their account was notoriously demanding. The primary contact there was a woman named Elizabeth Vance, a razor-sharp marketing director who valued two things above all else: results and directness. She hated corporate fluff and schmoozing, which meant she had a barely concealed disdain for Sarah. The only reason Innovate had kept the account was because of one person, David Chen. David was their lead graphic designer, a true artist. He was the quiet engine in the creative department, the one who turned vague concepts into stunning, award-winning visuals. His minimalist, elegant style was the entire foundation of Sterling's brand identity. Like Maya, he was brilliant, overworked, and perpetually overlooked because he wasn't a backslapping ideas man like Mark. Getting David was crucial. Maya and I spent the afternoon putting together a proposal for him. We weren't just offering him a job, we were offering him creative freedom. We offered him the title of creative director and, like Maya, a founding partner's equity. No more having his designs butchered by committee. No more having his concepts stolen and presented by people who couldn't draw a straight line. His vision would be the vision. That evening, I met David at a quiet bar. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. He told me the news about Apex had hit the office like a bomb. Morale was in the gutter, and Mark was in a state of perpetual rage, blaming everyone but himself. I listened, let him vent, and then I slid the Keystone strategy proposal across the table. He read it slowly, his expression unreadable. He looked at the equity offer, at the title, at the mission statement we had drafted about valuing creators. He was silent for a long time. "Mark's trying to get us to repitch for the Sterling account," he said finally, his voice flat. "He's terrified they'll be the next to go. He wants Sarah to lead it. And he wants you to do all the work so she can take all the credit," I finished for him. David nodded, a bitter smile on his face. "Same old story." He tapped a finger on the proposal. "This is real." "As real as it gets," I promised. "We're small. We're hungry. And we're building a place for people like us, people who actually do the work." He looked at me, a flicker of something I hadn't seen in him for years, hope, igniting in his eyes. He slid the proposal back into its folder, stood up, and extended his hand. "Let's go steal my old account," he said. The next morning, David walked into Innovate Inc. and resigned, effective immediately. The shockwave of his departure, coming right on the heels of the Apex disaster, must have been seismic. 2 hours later, an email, composed by David but sent from my new Keystone strategy address, landed in Elizabeth Vance's inbox at Sterling Automotive. It was concise and direct, just the way she liked it. It announced David's new role as creative director and partner at Keystone Strategy and politely requested a 15-minute introductory meeting. The response came in under 5 minutes. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., my office, don't be late. The next day, the three of us, me, the strategist, Maya, the analyst, and David, the artist, walked into the gleaming lobby of Sterling Automotive. We were a tiny, unproven agency about to pitch against the incumbent giant that had handled their account for years. The odds were stacked against us. But as we rode the elevator up to the executive floor, I felt a surge of confidence. We weren't just colleagues. We were a team of specialists, each a master of our craft, united by a shared purpose. Elizabeth Vance's office was corner suite perfection, with a panoramic view of the city. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I'll be honest," she said, her eyes boring into me. "I was surprised to hear about David, and I'm getting frantic calls from Mark at Innovate. So you have 10 minutes. Tell me why I shouldn't just stick with the devil I know." Before I could launch into my carefully prepared speech, David stepped forward and placed a single slim portfolio on her desk. "Elizabeth," he said calmly, "this is the preliminary concept for your next campaign. It's the one I've wanted to do for 3 years, but was always told was too bold or off-brand. This is my unfiltered vision for Sterling." Elizabeth opened the portfolio. Her perfectly composed expression flickered. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly as she turned the pages. She was looking at pure, undiluted genius. David's work, free from the compromises and meddling of Innovate's management. She closed it, her gaze shifting from David to Maya and then to me. She was silent for a moment, her fingers drumming on the leather cover. "My contract with Innovate has a 60-day out," she said, her voice a low, calculated purr. "But for a demonstrated failure to provide key personnel, say, the lead designer who is the sole architect of my brand's visual identity, that can be expedited. Drastically." She paused, letting the weight of her words fill the room. "Tell me, what are your agency's rates?" Walking out of that meeting at Sterling Automotive felt like stepping onto another planet. The air tasted sweeter. The sky looked brighter. We hadn't just won a pitch. We had performed a surgical extraction. Elizabeth Vance hadn't just been impressed. She had been liberated. For years, she had been fighting to get work like David's, only to be stymied by Mark's risk-averse, cookie-cutter approach. We hadn't sold her on a new agency. We had sold her on the promise of finally getting the work she always knew her brand deserved. By the time we were back in our glorified closet of an office, the signed contract was already waiting in my inbox. The news that Innovate Inc. had lost Sterling, their second pillar client, in as many weeks, ripped through the local ad community like a wildfire. My phone started buzzing with messages from old colleagues, some congratulatory, some envious, all of them shocked. Innovate Inc., once the unassailable titan, was bleeding, and everyone could smell the blood in the water. Mark, I heard, had gone completely nuclear, holding mandatory loyalty meetings and firing a junior account manager for having liked Keystone Strategies' newly created LinkedIn page. The family was fracturing under the pressure. We didn't have time to celebrate. Landing 2 massive clients meant we had to scale, and fast. The tiny office was suddenly, laughably inadequate. We needed people. We needed infrastructure. But we weren't just hiring bodies. We were building an army. My strategy was simple. I went after Innovate's keystones, not the slick talkers or the executives, but the quiet workhorses in the trenches. Our third hire was Liam, the media-buying wizard who could stretch a budget further than anyone I'd ever seen. He was underpaid and his brilliance was treated as a given, not a talent. When I showed him our projections and offered him a director title with profit sharing, he gave his 2 weeks' notice the same day. Then came Chloe, the project manager who kept the entire agency from falling into chaos, the one who actually knew where everything was and how everything worked. She was the company's institutional memory, and Mark treated her like an administrative assistant. We offered her the role of chief operating officer and a seat at the table where decisions were made. She walked out of Innovate Inc. mid-afternoon and was at our new, slightly larger office space by 5 p.m., already drawing up workflow charts on a whiteboard. With each new hire, we weren't just gaining an employee, we were inflicting a fresh wound on Innovate. We were taking the engine, piece by piece, leaving Mark with a hollow, polished shell. The people we hired were energized, liberated. They were bursting with ideas that had been suppressed for years. Our new office, a leased floor in a modern building that we paid for with the signing bonus from Sterling, was buzzing with a creative energy I had never experienced at Innovate. There was no fear, no politics, just a relentless focus on doing incredible work. Our third target was the one I considered the final nail in the coffin, Global Health Corp. They were Innovate's oldest and most stable client, not the biggest, but the most prestigious. Their account was the bedrock of the agency's reputation. The lead strategist on that account was a man named Tom. Tom had been my mentor. He was old school, brilliant, and deeply cynical about the direction Mark had taken the company. He had been quietly sidelined for years, his experience dismissed in favor of younger, cheaper talent who ticked the right boxes for Mark's vision. Getting Tom would be different. It wasn't about money or a title. It was about respect. I invited him out for a steak dinner at an old-fashioned place he liked. I didn't give him a hard sell. I just told him what we were building. A place where experience was valued, where strategy was driven by data and wisdom, not by buzzwords. I told him about Maya's analytics, David's designs, Chloe's operational genius. I told him we were missing one final piece, a seasoned, strategic mind to guide us, a keystone of wisdom. Tom listened, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "Mark knows you're coming for me," he said, his voice a low rumble. "He pulled me into his office yesterday, offered me a partnership, a corner office, anything I wanted, said he needed my help to weather the storm, a storm he created." "And what did you tell him?" I asked, my heart pounding. Tom took a long sip of his whiskey. "I told him I'd think about it." He looked me straight in the eye. He's desperate. He's finally realized that all the people he thought were disposable were actually the ones holding the whole damn thing up. He's losing everything, and he knows it's because of you. A grim satisfaction settled in my stomach. "Good," I said. "It's not good," Tom corrected me, his expression serious. "It's dangerous. A cornered animal is the most vicious. He's not just going to roll over and die. He's going to fight dirty." He leaned forward, his voice dropping even lower. "I was in his office late last night looking for a file. He didn't know I was there. He was on the phone with his lawyer. He was talking about you, about non-compete clauses, client solicitation, intellectual property theft. He's building a case, a lawsuit designed to bury you and your little startup in legal fees until you bleed out." The steak in my stomach turned to lead. A lawsuit? Of course. It was the classic move of a failing incumbent. He couldn't beat me in the market, so he was going to try and beat me in court. My savings were gone, poured into the new business. Every penny of our revenue was being reinvested into hiring and infrastructure. A protracted legal battle was the one thing we absolutely could not afford. Mark knew it. He wasn't trying to win, he was just trying to make sure I lost. "He doesn't have a case," I said, more to convince myself than Tom. "My contract didn't have a non-compete, and the clients came to me." "He'll claim you stole proprietary information," Tom countered. "Strategies, client data, he'll invent anything. His lawyers will file injunctions, bury you in discovery. It doesn't have to be true, it just has to be expensive." He finished his drink and set the glass down with a heavy thud. "I'm telling you this as a friend. Be careful. He's not just trying to save his company anymore, he's trying to destroy you." The next day, a thick manila envelope arrived at the office via courier. It was from a top-tier corporate law firm. Inside was a cease and desist letter, thick with legal threats and accusations of tortious interference and misappropriation of trade secrets. It was exactly as Tom had warned. The final paragraph was a clear threat. A lawsuit would be filed within 48 hours unless we immediately ceased all operations and returned all former Innovate Inc. clients. My team gathered around my desk, their faces pale as they read the letter. The vibrant energy of our new beginning was replaced by a cold dread. This was the attack we couldn't fight. This was Mark's checkmate. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered, my voice tense. "Is this the founder of Keystone Strategy?" a woman's voice asked. It was sharp and unfamiliar. "Who is this?" I asked, my patience worn thin. "My name is Sarah," she said. My blood ran cold. It was Sarah, Mark's golden girl, the one who had taken my job. "Don't hang up," she said quickly, her voice a nervous whisper. "I need to talk to you, not on the phone, in person. I have something you need to see. It's about Mark. It's proof. Proof that will stop this lawsuit cold and ruin him for good." I felt a jolt, a mix of pure shock and deep suspicion. Sarah? The architect of my professional demise, the one who glided into the corner office on the back of my hard work, was now offering me a lifeline? It sounded like a trap, a Trojan horse designed to lure me into a compromising position that Mark's lawyers could exploit. My team was looking at me, their expressions a mirror of my own disbelief. "Why should I trust you?" I asked, my voice flat and cold. "You stood by and watched him fire me. You took my job. As far as I'm concerned, you're one of them." There was a shaky breath on the other end of the line. "Because I'm a fool," she said, her voice small and stripped of its usual corporate confidence. "I thought he was a mentor. I thought he was grooming me for leadership. But now that everything's falling apart, I see what he really is. He's not a leader. He's a parasite. And I'm next on his list to blame. He told me yesterday that the loss of the Sterling account was due to my failure to manage key creative talent. He's setting me up to be the next scapegoat." Her voice hardened with a fury that sounded genuine. "I'm not going to let him do that. I'm not going down for him." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her. We chose a neutral, anonymous location, a bench in a public park miles from either of our offices. She arrived looking haggard, a far cry from the polished executive I remembered. She was clutching a slim USB drive in her hand as if it were a holy relic. "After you left," she began, not looking at me, "Mark became unhinged, paranoid. He started documenting everything, trying to build this case against you. He tasked me with going through old server files, looking for any email, any document that could be twisted to look like you were planning this all along." She finally turned to look at me, her eyes filled with a grim sort of vindication. "He's a sloppy, arrogant man. He assumes no one ever looks in his personal server folders. But I did. I found everything. Internal emails where he explicitly takes credit for your Apex strategy to the board, financial records, and this." She held up the USB drive. "This is the gold mine." She explained that Innovate Inc. had won a major government marketing contract 3 years ago, a massive windfall that had established them as a major player. But the bidding process had always been suspect. On the drive, she said, were emails between Mark and a high-ranking official. Incriminating emails. They detailed kickbacks, inflated invoices, and shell companies used to funnel money back to the official in exchange for inside information that ensured Innovate would win the bid. Mark hadn't just been unethical, he had been committing federal crimes. Fraud. Bribery. He wasn't just facing a business collapse, he was facing prison time. "He's using the company's legal fund to come after you," Sarah said, pushing the drive into my hand. "It's all he has left. If you show this to his lawyers, they'll drop him so fast he won't know what hit him. No reputable firm will touch this." She stood up, her part in the drama finished. "Just do me one favor. When you take the rest of his clients, leave Global Health Corp for me. Tom and I can manage it. We'll start our own thing, a clean slate." I walked back to my office with the USB drive feeling heavy in my pocket. This was more than I had ever bargained for. I didn't want to destroy Mark's life. Not like this. I just wanted to build a better company. But as Tom had said, a cornered animal is vicious. Mark had tried to ruin me, to bury my dream under a mountain of legal bills based on lies. He had left me no choice. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was survival. The next morning, I didn't call Mark's lawyers. I called Mark directly. I told him to meet me in 1 hour, at his office. I told him to be alone. When I walked into the lobby of Innovate Inc., it was like a ghost town. The vibrant buzz was gone, replaced by a funereal quiet. The few employees I saw looked up with hollow eyes before quickly looking away. Mark was in his office, looking 10 years older. The expensive suit hung off his frame, and his desk was a mess of papers. He started to bluster the moment I walked in, threatening me with legal ruin. I didn't say a word. I just walked to his desk, took out the USB drive Sarah had given me, and plugged it into his computer. I opened the folder of emails. His face went from red with anger to a ghastly, waxy white as he saw the subject lines. His name. The official's name. Project Nightingale Invoices. He collapsed into his chair as if his bones had turned to dust. "The lawsuit is over," I said, my voice calm and devoid of emotion. "You will send a formal retraction of all claims to my legal counsel within the hour. You will not contact me, my employees, or my clients ever again. You will walk away from this and disappear. If I hear so much as a whisper that you're trying to cause trouble, this drive goes straight to the U.S. Attorney's Office." He just stared at the screen, defeated. He nodded slowly, a broken man. I pulled the drive from the port and walked out of his office, leaving him in the ruins of the empire he had built on the backs of others. I didn't look back. 6 months later, Keystone Strategy moved into the very same office suite that Innovate Inc. had once occupied. They had declared bankruptcy a week after my visit, the whole rotten structure collapsing once the keystones were removed. We got the space for a steal. We tore down the glass walls of the executive offices, creating an open, collaborative space. We replaced the foosball table with a state-of-the-art workshop for David's creative team. Maya was head of a growing analytics department, her insights now the celebrated core of our business. Tom joined us as Chief Strategy Officer, his wisdom guiding our expansion. Our client roster was growing, filled with companies who had heard about our work and wanted a partnership built on transparency and talent. One afternoon, I was standing in my new office, a modest one with a door I kept open, looking out at the bustling, happy team we had built. My phone buzzed. It was a picture message from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a screenshot of a news article. Sarah, true to her word, had teamed up with Tom's former deputy and landed the Global Health Corp account, forming her own small, successful agency. The picture was of her and her new partner, smiling, holding an award. Attached was a simple message, "Thank you and good luck." I smiled. The anger, the bitterness I had felt for so long was finally gone, replaced by a profound sense of peace. I hadn't set out to destroy Mark. I had set out to prove him wrong. And in the process, we had built something better, something real. "Lack of potential," he had said. Standing there, looking out at the thriving company born from those very words, I realized he had been right in a way. I never had the potential to be like him, and thank God for that.